Welcome everyone to another post-playthrough thoughts and review video. I hope you're all having a great day so far. Today, as usual, I'll be taking you all through my thoughts on and history with a game that we played together on stream. In this video, the game in question will be one that seemed to be quite popular on my stream, Pokémon X. As usual, I'm going to be keeping this review as spoiler-free as possible, but I'm not exactly hiding much of the gym progression or the Elite Four since they're so standard in the Pokémon franchise. However, I will be letting you guys know when narrative spoilers are coming so you can skip those if you'd like. With that being said, here are my thoughts on the 6th generation of Pokémon. Even today, I'm a hardcore Nintendo fan. I may not show it as much outwardly these days, but Nintendo games have always been some of my greatest comforts in life. Especially back in high school, Nintendo games are virtually all I played. Between Mario, The Legend of Zelda, Metroid, and the rest, Nintendo had my heart in a vice grip. But despite that, I held a very uncharacteristic opinion for a diehard Nintendo fanboy. I didn't enjoy Pokémon. Pokémon of all franchises, not anything more obscure like Pikmin, Animal Crossing, or Fire Emblem, franchises which are less so for everyone. No, I didn't like one of Nintendo's biggest 3 franchises, which really made me feel like a fraud at times. It's not that I hated Pokemon as a concept. In fact, I quite enjoyed a number of Pokemon spin-offs over the years. Pokemon Ranger, Pokemon Rumble, and Pokemon Mystery Dungeon were all spin-off series that I played and loved at least one entry of. Instead, the real reason I didn't get into the Pokemon main series was my RPG turnoff. I thought I hated RPGs for the longest time as I really had no patience for grinding, but fortunately in recent years I've found that this isn't really the case. My first Pokemon RPG was Pokemon Pearl, which I started on my actual 10th birthday. I played all the way through, explored the post-game, and then cheated for Pokemon spawns. I mean, I was a kid, so I really didn't get everything out of the game, especially since cheating can make things much less fun for me nowadays, but I still have a lot of nostalgia for that game. But after Pearl, I just couldn't get back into a main series RPG. I tried to play Soul Silver, I tried to play White, and I even got past the first gym of X, but for some reason, maybe related to my attention span, I just wasn't finishing these games. This was before I made a vow to myself to actually finish my games, playing just one until I'm done, so that's the only explanation that really makes sense to me. Thanks to Miitopia, which I played immediately before this game, I rediscovered my love for RPGs, and it just felt right to try to return to Pokemon. I had some mods urging me to give it a shot, and Pokemon was a major contributing factor to me setting up a 3DS to stream from. Finally, my last full Pokemon experience was 10 years ago. I started Pearl on my actual 10th birthday, and now I was given the chance to start Pokemon X on my 20th birthday. It's like I was always meant to be a Pokemon trainer. So, did I enjoy my trip to the Kalos region, immersing myself once again into the world of Pokemon? Or did I continue to not enjoy the adventures offered by this cultural juggernaut of a franchise? Pokemon X is a far cry graphically from the Gen 4 game I played years ago. The game is fully modeled with not a sprite to be seen, and this is a mixed bag of results. The environment and character and Pokemon models are all pretty well done for the 3DS, and I didn't generally have a problem with how the game looks. All of the overworld gameplay is charming aesthetically, but that makes the battles stick out like a sore thumb to me. Though the Pokemon animate decently, not incredibly, but decently, the battle environments are extremely hit or miss. Look at how dull interior battles look, for instance. Generally, I like how Pokemon X looks and I can't be too critical of it, but it still does suffer one egregious fault. I'm shocked at how poorly this game runs on a 3DS. I don't think I've ever seen a game lag on the system before, and I'm even using an overclocked 3DS, so it should run better. And I know this problem persists on normal 3DSs too, so it can't be my technical modifications causing this. Worst of all, Pokemon X is a 3DS game that has virtually no 3D implementation. Only in battles is the 3D enabled, and it's only really noticeable on the Mega Evolution effect, and maybe like 2 moves. As a huge fan of the system's unique features, this is monumentally disappointing to me. I can generally say more positive things about Pokemon X's soundtrack. Though again, I feel there's some weak points. Pokemon X matches the right vibe with the situation consistently, with most of its route themes feeling bouncy or grandiose, invoking feelings of adventure, town themes varying between exciting, relaxing, and mysterious, and battle themes generally being energetic and exciting. There's some extremely diverse instrumentation used in this game, with piano, harpsichord, synthesizers, varied percussion, strings, winds, and brasses all used from time to time, and no two songs sound exactly alike. Some of the early game route themes are, I think, the most samey, but they're still audibly distinct. The quality of tracks noticeably increases as you progress through the game in my opinion, with standout tracks being Snowbell City, Shallower City, the Champions and Team Flare bosses battle themes, and the Kalos power plant. I do unfortunately have some dishonorable mentions, and tragically, it includes the Xerneas Yveltal battle theme. This theme just didn't do it for me at all, with only a few measures of music that I can really get into in the right context. Additionally, I don't love the base Team Flare theme, and I really wish the game had more battle themes. There's one wild Pokemon theme, one gym battle theme, and one non-special trainer theme. That's it. Surely a few more for different locations or phases of the game could elevate the soundtrack to greater heights, but no, I guess battles get the same tunes throughout the entire game. Fortunately, the tracks that just didn't work for me were few and far between, and my battle theme criticism is more of a nitpick. Pokemon X's soundtrack is generally solid with some real kick-ass tracks within it. One of the first things I noticed was that the core gameplay formula of Pokemon is still extremely fun all these years later. And Pokemon X has some significant improvements to the formula that I remember from Gen 4. Gaining experience is easier than ever with the new and improved EXP share, which will affect all of your Pokemon, which, when coupled with the fact that you now gain experience from catching Pokemon too, means that I never once had to grind. This is pretty fantastic in my opinion, since, as I'm sure most of you know by now, I value good pacing in my RPGs. Building my team, picking out their moves for optimal type coverage, and learning all the type matchups proves to be an immensely fun experience for me. In the early game, I went around catching them all, filling out my Pokedex, and eventually swapping out a few members of my core team with newcomers who scaled better or who just provided more for the team. But that was hard! I grew attached to my little guys pretty quickly, but in the end it was way better for me to have greater type diversity in my team. To reiterate myself from my Miitopia review, I always look to see what JRPGs do differently, since although a turn-based RPG can keep me invested, it's those new mechanics from game to game that really keep me interested in the combat. Really, Pokemon's JRPG mechanics are pretty standard in terms of its move selection and item usage, but the 1v1 dynamic is still pretty unique today, and I can totally understand why this franchise is so popular. As someone with barely any Pokemon experience, identifying the right Pokemon for each stage of a battle gave me such a rush of excitement and kept me invested in the battle system, since I always have to consider when a swap might be in my best interests. Just so you guys can understand the context around my thoughts a bit better, my final team was Hammy the Delphox, Blueberry the Lucario, Ranch the Simipour, Salad the Venusaur, Nugget the Gigalith, and Cheese the Garchomp. Honorable mentions go to the goons who helped us through the earlier stages of the game, like Lettuce the Butterfree, Bread the Pidgeotto, Bagel the Amora, and Hot Dog the Barrel. Now, there is one huge issue I had when thinking back on my playthrough, and that's how often I would straight up one-shot someone. I don't think I ever considered the possibility that I could lose a battle, since it never really seemed to be a risk outside of a specific battle marathon in the post-game. Pokemon X is a really easy game, made more difficult only when I screwed up and sent in a Pokemon who was super vulnerable to an opponent's. Pokemon X was still generally fun in the moment, but I want good pacing, not necessarily a walk in the park. And a moderate challenge that can be overcome in 1 or 3 attempts with serious effort is way more engaging generally than a main story that offers little to no legitimate challenge. And it's really not that my Pokemon were over-leveled. The champion was not a challenge when my Pokemon were only on average 4 levels up from her Pokemon. If Pokemon X hadn't been my first Pokemon game in 10 years, I don't think I'd have had nearly as much fun with it, as I'd have simply blazed through the game. Pokemon X generally controls very well, and I'd hope it does at this point. Easy touch interface for almost everything, simple overworld movement, and fun movement when you bust out your roller skates, which finally let you break free of the 4 cardinal directions and the tile restrictions in the map. I really had a good time moving around in this game, with one critical exception. Lumio City is genuinely awful. It feels like you're on tank controls with this camera behind your character, and most doors are magnetic or something, just sucking you in when you're trying to go around them. Ugh, this city was a mess. On your Pokemon X journey, you get 4 companions traveling with you, and I did happen to like these characters. They, along with Professor Sycamore, injected some much-needed personality into this game, and I really liked how they all had different goals to encourage the player to pursue many avenues of progression in-game. Trevor liked to fill his Pokedex and compare against yours, Serena served as your main battle rival, Tierno just liked to dance, and Shauna made shoehorned in, yet only implied somehow romantic advances at you despite you having known her for all of 10 minutes. Chill out, Shauna. This went nowhere, by the way, but I digress. I really did like the companions throughout the game, but they had this bad tendency of just appearing out of nowhere, telling you in no uncertain terms where exactly to go next, and then just bailing on you. They're really hand-holdy, and it would be okay once in a while, coming off as friends just planning where to meet next, but seriously, there's only so many directions I can go. Would it really be so much to ask to let me figure out where on this mostly linear path I should go next? There's already roadblocks on some routes prohibiting my passage. This is just excessive. But when your friends aren't being glorified directions, they're decently enjoyable characters to interact with, which is way more than I can say about almost every NPC in the game. It probably wasn't worth speaking to most people in these towns just to hear their one random line of dialogue, to be honest. Pokemon X also has some really weird pacing throughout its main game. Take a look at the names of these 2 streams. Which one do you think had 0 gyms in its runtime, and which had multiple? So yeah, there's periods in this game that focus more on the narrative, and then all of a sudden after that, you can get 3 consecutive towns with gyms in them, none of which I had to grind a challenge, which just felt odd to me. Sure, challenging all the gyms in the Pokemon League may be your ultimate goal starting at the very beginning of the game, but shouldn't there be more events with narrative bearing on them between these gyms? Team Flare is around, stirring up trouble as this game's villainous team, but actually, come to think of it, I really didn't want to see more of these guys. Pokemon's always been very formulaic, with your Pokemon journey coming first and the narrative just sort of happening around it, always resolving before you can challenge the Pokemon League. I can remember the exact same thing happening in Pearl, though I don't remember the specifics of what Team Galactic was doing. Despite that foggy memory, though, I'm absolutely certain I understood more about them than Team Flare. Anytime I ended up in a genuine encounter with them, it just felt like I was stopping some random nefarious deed. Sure, they're planning something, but they genuinely don't feel like they matter for most of the game. By the 6th stream or so, I was honestly thinking, wow, this story kinda sucks. And that's legitimately the first time I've thought that about a game I streamed. I do have more to say about the story, but to do so I need to get into spoiler territory. You'll see some timestamps below, so you can go on the time to the left to skip to my post-game discussion, and to the time on the right to skip all the spoilers altogether, and jump right to the conclusions. Ready to go? Here's what I think about the spoiler part of the story. What made the story that much worse for me was the giant neon "I'm the bad guy" sign Lysander was carrying around. He's talking about making a new world, being strange from the moment you spawn him, and no one seems to care. Not even Professor Sycamore, who's honestly kind of dumb for a professor. And nothing Team Flare did seemed to live up to his ideology. They're stealing Pokemon so only fashionable people can have them? Okay, sure, that'll totally create a better world for you. I'm of course joking and oversimplifying it a bit. It does make sense in retrospect why Lysander's trying to hoard everything for Team Flare, but that doesn't mean that the Team Flare sections were engaging or interesting. And come to think of it, neither was the Pokemon War lore that we hear about early on. In the case of the war, it's not the concept that's uninteresting, rather that nothing is done with it after Geosenge Town until the very end. But as I was stewing about how subpar the story seemed to be, I was pleasantly surprised when the climax hit. Suddenly, at this very moment with Team Flare's plans about to come to fruition, legitimate stakes were drawn. Emotional scenes calling back to the established Kalos lore finally brought some payoff to that and increased the tension of the moment, and Lysander's plan finally kinda made sense. And it turns out the crazy bastard is going to make the world a better place by straight up committing genocide on all people and Pokemon, excluding Team Flare so those who remain can cooperate. Holy shit, man. Now that's a goddamn crazy plan that I'm totally interested in interfering with. I'd appreciate some of the cops to show up, given that Lysander televised his intentions, but I, a 10-year-old child, was at the very least finally looking forward to stopping it. After a long dungeon whose length finally injects a modicum of pre-planning into the game, and a battle with Xerneas that can't even remotely hold a candle to Palkia's fight from Gen 4, taking down Lysander was finally a satisfying experience in the narrative. It challenged my idea that the game's plot was weak. That's how fun I found it. but ultimately a game should not have to wait for its actual climax for its story to hold any weight. The post-game had some decent content for me, fortunately, and I got about 6 hours out of it. The Battle Maison offers fights that are a genuine challenge, partially because of a limit of 3 Pokemon and competitive rule sets, and that was neat for the brief period I enjoyed that for. There's a few bonus legendary fights, and though Zygarde offered no challenge, the disgusting stalling tank that is Mewtwo took me many attempts and felt great to capture in the end. It would have been so much easier had I just tried to kill him, but of course I can't pass up Mewtwo. I encountered one roaming legendary, being Zapdos, but elected to not pursue that part of the game. The meat of the post-game is an extra story involving Looker, detective extraordinaire, which didn't raise the difficulty of the game at all, but which gave me a genuinely entertaining story to sort through, involving the remnants of Team Flare and a young girl who lived on the streets of Lumiose City. It was quite emotional at times, and I wish that the main story had been executed to this level of quality, because that would have instantly made Pokemon X a much better game. The Looker side story was a great experience. Outside of that, Pokemon X maintains the post-game of the rest of the series. With the National Dex now equipped, you can start figuring out how you're going to get your hands on every Pokemon out there. You can make a competitive team and battle your friends, constantly trying to improve, or you can start shiny hunting. Now, none of this really appealed to me a lot, so after finishing with Looker, I'd had my fill of this game, but I do love just how much remains available for the die-hard fans of Pokemon. Substantial optional post-games are usually good in my book. It's just that in this case, it wasn't for me. It is much to my dismay that, in the end, I consider Pokemon X a mediocre game that gets completely carried by the core Pokemon formula. Between a weak narrative and extremely easy progression, there's just not a lot here for core Pokemon fans. But that's looking at the game critically. As an experience, I actually had quite a lot of fun playing this game, and despite my complaints, I enjoyed it through and through. It made for a pretty solid entry point back into the series for me, and at least there's some solid songs from its soundtrack that I may be adding to my playlist. I'm still going to be playing this game a little bit, since I want to experience some of the hardcore Pokemon experience by shiny hunting for my first ever shiny, a Roggenrola. At the time of this recording, I'm 77 eggs deep with the Masada method, and though I've been slacking, I'm sure I'll get that eventually. As for the rest of the Pokemon series, I've got to say I'm interested in playing more. Though I don't intend to purchase Sword or Shield right at their release, I may end up playing those eventually, or perhaps Pokemon Red. I do know that if Sinnoh remakes ever come out, I'll be jumping on that train immediately to revisit my childhood live on stream. I want to thank each and every one of you for watching this video. If watching this convinced you to play Pokemon for yourself, or if you've already played and have something to say about my thoughts, I'd love for you to join in the conversation in the comments below. If this is the first you've seen of my content, you can find me at twitch.tv/turkeysub23. And if you were here during my Pokemon X streams, thank you so much for helping me sort out my type matchups and for experiencing the adventure with me. Have a wonderful night, have a great day tomorrow, and don't forget, fighting beats steel, fighting beats steel, fighting beats steel. Why couldn't I ever remember that one?